Well, welcome. We're going to call this meeting to order. So welcome for those attending via Zoom. Please note that it is our standard practice for members of the public to have their cameras off and microphones muted until it is time for the member to speak. Township staff can assist with muting microphones. If you require assistance, please use the chat function and ask staff. So public meetings have been called and notice circulated in accordance with the Planning Act with respect to applications for minor variance and or consent. The purpose of public meetings are to inform and provide the public with an opportunity to ask questions and to express views with respect to the applications. The format of the public meeting is as follows. Township staff will explain the purpose of the application and report on all correspondence received. Next, the applicant will present on any further relevant information. Next, the public will be permitted to ask questions and express views on the proposal, and then the public portion of the meeting will be closed. And next, members of the committee will be given the opportunity to ask questions for clarification of the application. After all comments have been received, the committee will consider the application with due regard to the presentations and views expressed this evening. The committee will then do one of three things. 1, approve the application. 2, deny the application. Or 3, defer the application pending receipt of additional information. Members of the public who have provided oral submissions or written objections but disagree with the committee's decision on an application may appeal the decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal as entitled under the Planning Act. The deadline for an appeal of consent applications is 20 days within the giving of the notice, and for minor variances within 20 days of the decision date. When commenting on an application, please give your full name and address for the minutes. Please note that the names and addresses of those individuals who speak at this meeting will appear within the meeting minutes, which are public documents. If you wish to receive a copy of the decision, please leave your name and address with township staff. So I'm going to move on in our agenda. Is there any from committee members? Is there any disclosure? Sorry, we're gonna appoint a vice chair and. Yeah, so we're going to A1 is we're going to appoint a vice chair or a chair and vice chair for 2024 to 2026. So I have a motion before me that's moved by member Hawkins, second by member Bossy, that the following members be appointed as chair and vice chair for the remainder of the term. So in 2024, it'd be chair member Kish, vice chair member Hiles. In 2025, it'd be chair member Hiles, vice chair member Bossy. In 2026, it'd be chair member Bossy, vice chair member Hawkins. So I'm gonna call for a vote on that motion. We got all those in favor. We are carried. So moving on to item B, disclosure of pecuniary interest. Do any members have any conflicts that they want to declare this evening? Seeing as there's none, I'm going to move on. I'm going to call for a motion for the adoption of the minutes from the last Committee of Adjustment meeting. So I have a motion in front of me identified as COA 2023-056, moved by member Bossy, second by member Hiles, that the minutes of the November 21st, 2023 Committee of Adjustment meeting be adopted as printed and distributed. I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor, we are carried. We're going to move on to item D. Would township staff briefly introduce the application and report on any response to the notice circulated for agenda item D1, which is an application for minor variance identified as A-12-23.
Thank you, Chair. So our first application this evening, as mentioned, is adjourned minor variance A-12-23. Thomas for lands located at 4590 Trent Trail. A key map of the subject property is shown here. The property is outlined in red, located along the Severn River, access via Trent Trail, just west of Highway 11 and north of Canal Road. The 2023 aerial imagery, County of Simcoe aerial imagery, shows the existing subject property as it sits today as vacant. There is an existing driveway installed to the property, which you can see in this area, as well as some clearing which has occurred on the property in anticipation of future development. This application, as some members of the committee may recall, was previously deferred by the committee in September of 2023 with a requirement for it to be brought back to the committee in December of 2023 for further consideration and decision. The applicant is requesting minor variances for reduced front yard setback and increased lot coverage on a waterfront property to facilitate the construction of a single detached dwelling and a detached garage. Minor variances are also requested for an increased driveway width as identified by staff, and as such was included on the revised notice, which was circulated per the committee's direction. Staff also noted an error in the originally circulated minor variances with respect to the maximum lot coverage, and have corrected that on this revised notice, which was given for this evening's meeting. Staff do not agree with the professional planning opinion of the applicant's planning consultant with respect to the front yard setback minor variance. So just in summary, here are the 4 minor variances which were requested. The first is a reduced maximum shoreline buffer width. The bylaw would normally require that a minimum width of 15 meter for a shoreline buffer, whereas the applicant has requested a minimum width of 13.3 meters. A front yard setback normally required by the bylaw is 20 meters, whereas the applicant has requested 15 meters to the dwelling and 13.3 meters to an attached, uncovered, and unenclosed deck. A maximum lot coverage of 20.8%, whereas the bylaw would normally permit 20%. Just to refer back a slide or two there, the initial application requested a minor variance for an increased lot coverage from 15% to 20.8%. As staff have noted, the original request was an error as the subject lands are actually zoned shoreline residential 2 because they are partially serviced with municipal water septic system. So the bylaw does allow for that slight increase of lot coverage as of right on the SR2 zone from 15% to 20. So the variance there is actually for 0.8%. And additionally, the new minor variance before the committee this evening is a increase in the maximum driveway width, which normally the bylaw permits the lesser of 8 meters or 50% of the lot's frontage, whereas the applicant is requesting 9.9 meters. And as mentioned, that was not initially requested, but staff did note that it exceeds the zoning bylaw permissions and have included it on the notice. Here we have a site plan. This was updated per the previous deferral to include the provisions and additional information with respect to the floodway, which was part of the initial concerns as identified in the previous staff report. I will zoom in here a little bit, and I do apologize that it might still be a bit hard to see on the screen. But essentially, this thicker black line here is the limit of the floodway. So the applicant has demonstrated as part of this application now that development can be situated on the property outside of the floodway, which addressed that initial concern of staff. Further, they are proposing their septic system here on the property, as well as a detached garage in the rear yard. However, those setbacks, which are noted as being requested for reduced setbacks to the dwelling and the deck, staff are not supportive of. These are just some front elevation drawings of the proposed dwelling. The first one here is the front or the water side, and the second drawing here is the roadside or the rear of the dwelling. Just some site photos that staff took during our site inspection. Really, there's not a lot to see on the site right now as it is vacant, but both of these photos are taken. This first one here is taken from the road looking into the property, and the second one here is just standing up a little bit further on the property in sort of this area, looking into that sort of natural regrowth which has occurred since the property was cleared. So as discussed within the staff report, there is quite a lengthy analysis in there with respect to the PPS, the growth plan, the official plan of the County of Simcoe and the township, as well as the 4 tests of a minor variance. I will just give a brief summary to the committee, but essentially staff looked at this with each individual minor variance request sort of independent, to see which ones staff felt could be supported. So as we went through, staff did note that there was a number of conformity and compliance issues with a number of the minor variances. And staff did not feel that all of the minor variances met the 4 tests or conformed to or didn't conflict with any of the applicable provincial policy documents. We do feel that there are definitely opportunities to accommodate a greater front yard setback to ensure the linkages and the function of the shoreline area. There was no justification provided for a reduced VPZ, which is a requirement of the growth plan. So as such, staff did consider the minor variances separately, and staff are of the opinion that the minor variance for an increased lot coverage is the only request which conforms to or does not conflict with the applicable policies and meets the 4 tests. There were comments provided, no comments or objections were provided from the Fire and Emergency Services Department or the clerk's office. Public Works did give comments with respect to a drainage outlet and concerns with the increased driveway width for reasons such as snow storage, access, and maintenance. And finally, CN did provide some comments requesting that if any sort of development approvals were to be granted, that there be a development agreement to incorporate warning clauses with respect to the nearby rail line, as well as require the use of mitigation measures in any sort of dwelling design. So in consideration of all of that, planning staff do recommend that the committee provisionally approve the minor variance requesting an increased lot coverage subject to the recommended conditions and deny the other minor variances which were circulated. These conditions are recommended to be imposed on the provisional approval of the increased lot coverage minor variance, being that the taxes be paid to date, the construction shall be in substantial compliance with the plans submitted with the application, the property owner enter into a development agreement with the municipality pursuant to section 45(9.1) of the Act in order to establish the following: a vegetation protection zone to protect the existing vegetation on the property and restore the shoreline area to the maximum extent possible. Provide for additional plantings of native and self-sustaining species and or measures to protect and enhance the vegetation within the vegetation protection zone. The collection of securities to ensure the retention of the VPZ. Provide for silt fencing, erosion, and siltation control, and construction-related measures to protect the shoreline area during construction. Require a lot grading plan prepared by a professional engineer to confirm the setbacks, with that confirmation provided by an OLS. The footings be pinned to ensure conformance with the approved lot grading plan. A warning clause concerning how the property is located within the mapped floodway and flood fringe of the Severn River and prohibit additional development on the property, as well as the warning clauses from CN, as well as the mitigation measures that CN has requested, including the use of air conditioning, different facades on the building to limit noise, acoustic upgrades to windows, and ensuring that the noise sensitive rooms are away from the railway side. And lastly, that all costs associated with the agreement and it being registered on title would be the responsibility of the property owner. So that concludes my presentation for the committee this evening on this application. If there are any questions, I would be happy to answer. I would just remind the committee that as was circulated to you earlier today, the applicant has submitted a letter requesting deferral of the application to allow additional time. Thank you.
Okay, does the applicant or their agent have anything further to add to the application? Attending via Zoom, please unmute yourself and turn on your camera if you would like. If you have a presentation, you can share your screen. Anybody? So it looks like we don't have anybody. So that's great. So we'll move on to, we have any persons present who have either questions or wish to speak in favor or in opposition to the application? I'm going to say there's nobody, so I declare the public portion of the meeting closed. Are there any individuals in, if there's no further questions, do any members of the committee require further clarification or wish to provide comments on this application? Member Bossy.
I can't remember the deferral date they wanted to January.
January 16th, 2024. So I guess we need to make a decision what we would like to proceed with. So we can either do one of two things. Okay. So yeah, it's I guess through the township staff, what would a deferral provide? It would provide the planner more time to look at your staff report and align or submit a revised application.
Through the chair to committee, the deferral would allow the applicant to, again, consider the comments from township staff included as part of our staff report. They may choose to bring forward a revised proposal. They may choose to come back to the committee with the same request. I can't really speak to that. I think staff have reviewed this application, and based on what's been provided today, we don't have any justification or reasoning that's been demonstrated to staff why a reduced front yard setback is there. Obviously, there is still some other variances that are requested, but ultimately it would be sort of up to the committee how you choose to proceed with this application.
Okay. And then the other question I would have, if we chose to defer the application, is there enough time with the holiday season upon us to actually turn this thing around and bring it back to the next meeting?
To the chair, no. Unfortunately, there wouldn't be enough time if you went with the applicant's January date. Staff would maybe point out to the committee that, if you were to entertain a deferral here, there is no construction activity taking place on site. There's nothing ongoing. So, a tight turnaround time isn't something that may be necessary in this case. There hasn't been any construction without a permit. There hasn't been any activity occurring on site. I mean, other than the driveway, but that's not a concern. So if the committee chose to consider a further deferral, you may wish to not even put a timeline on it. But again, that's entirely up to yourselves.
Any other comments? So deferral, open-end deferral. The only issue with an open-end deferral is it sits around forever and the file stays open. But I would say maybe my recommendation is maybe to the end of March, and that's possibly it. So I think there is support for a deferral of this application. So I'll be calling for a motion for deferral. if that's a possibility, and if we've got commitment to the end of March 2024. So as we whip that up, just bear with us. So for those joining us via YouTube and Zoom, it'll just be a minute or so, and then something should appear in front of us all. Go ahead.
So to the chair, I'm just wondering if the committee is looking to see this application circulated again when it comes back to the public. If there was changes to the application that necessitated, like obviously if there were changes that necessitated that, it would have to be recirculated. But if there were no changes to the variances that necessitated notice under the act, does the committee want to see it circulated again regardless, or just brought back to the committee without public notice?
Don't want to speak for everyone, but I think past presence or past in the past, we've typically, if it hasn't changed, then the public portion wouldn't be applicable. So if there are changes, then notice would be circulated. But if there was no changes, then notice wouldn't be circulated. I think that's fair. Here we go. So we have a motion before us that staff report D23-032 be received, and that minor variance application A-12-23 be deferred to a later committee of adjustment meeting pending a revised proposal or receive further planning justification as described within staff report D23-023 and D-23-032. And further, that the application be brought back to the March 2024 Committee of Adjustment meeting for further consideration and decision. Is everybody good with the wording of that? So I need a mover and a seconder. So I have a motion that's moved by member Bossy, second by member Hiles. So believe we're going to call for a vote. So all those in favor of this motion? We are carried. So that's it for that application. So that application, the hearing for this application is now closed. We are going to move on. So would township staff briefly introduce the application and report on any written response to the notice circulated for agenda item identified as E1, which is an application for a minor variance A-17-23.
Thank you, Chair. So the next application here is A-17-23 for lands located at 3415 Reservoir Road. We have a key map of the subject property shown in red. It is located near the end of Reservoir Road. Reservoir Road is sort of like a service road or a connection between the on-ramp for the southbound of Highway 400. And it also services a handful of residential dwellings at the end of the property or the end of the road there. Here we have the 2023 aerial imagery of the subject property. You can see the existing dwelling located here. There is an existing porch shown in this imagery as well as a detached accessory structure in the rear yard of the property located here. So the applicant is proposing to construct an addition to the existing non-complying dwelling. The requested minor variances include a reduced front, interior, and rear yards, as well as an increased lot coverage. The existing detached accessory building in the rear yard is proposed to be demolished, and a new septic system is proposed to service the proposed development. So in total, this table here just describes the variances which are requested. A reduced front yard setback of 11 meters to the proposed dwelling, a reduced front yard setback of 9.9 meters to an attached covered unenclosed porch, a reduced interior side yard setback on the east lot line of 2 meters, a reduced interior yard setback of 4.2 meters to the west interior lot line, a reduced rear yard setback of 6.51 meters, and an increased maximum lot coverage of 26%. So here we have the site plan of the subject property. It might be a little bit hard to see on the screen there, but I'll try to zoom in. So here we have the existing dwelling. The area shown here in red being this portion, as well as the porch which extends across the front, are proposed to be demolished, along with the existing accessory buildings in the rear yard. Through the proposed works, an addition would be constructed that sort of surrounds the east side of the dwelling and to the rear, as well as a porch at the front, just in this location here. The applicant has proposed to install a new septic system located in the front yard here, and the building division has reviewed that in accordance with the Ontario Building Code and has stated no objections to the design, which was submitted as part of this application. Concurrently, a new drilled well is proposed to be installed in the rear yard here, again in accordance with minimum separation distances of the Ontario Building Code. Here we have some elevation drawings of the proposed resulting dwelling, which would include that addition along the side here, a sort of restructuring of some roof lines, as well as the new porch at the front. During staff's site visit, we did take these pictures here. So the first one is standing on the road looking in towards the dwelling here. This is standing on the east side of that dwelling looking down the side lot line, with the property line being sort of somewhere over in this area approximately. And then this photo here is taken from standing at about this point looking into the rear yard, back at that existing detached accessory building, which is proposed to be demolished. In the last couple of photos here, just standing in the backyard looking up the west side of the dwelling. The property line somewhat follows this fence, generally speaking. And again, just sort of looking towards the road from what would be the driveway to provide the required parking. So throughout staff report D23-33, staff did analyze the application as it relates to the PPS, the growth plan, the official plan of the County of Simcoe and the Township of Severn, as well as the 4 tests as required under the Planning Act. Staff do feel that the application, for the reasons as described within the staff report, does conform to or does not conflict with any of the applicable policies, as well as does meet those 4 tests. The demolition of those existing accessory buildings in the rear yard do assist to limit the proposed increase to the lot coverage, and an acceptable servicing solution has been provided on site, as well as the minimum required parking. Staff are comfortable with those proposed reduced side yard setbacks, as there still remains sufficient room to maneuver around the building to accommodate construction as well as maintenance, and provide for buffering opportunities to the applicant in the future. As mentioned, the building division has no objections to the requested minor variances. They did undertake that preliminary review of the plans provided with the septic permit application. And that review has been undertaken, and it generally appears to comply with the requirements of the Ontario Building Code. No comments or objections were received from the clerk's office, the Public Works, or Fire and Emergency Services departments. And there was 1 letter of no objection received from the public. Planning and development staff have no objections to the approval of the minor variances, subject to the conditions, simply being that taxes are paid, the construction shall be in substantial compliance with the plans that were submitted with the application, and that the existing vegetation on the property be preserved and enhanced as much as possible. So that concludes my presentation. If the committee has any questions, happy to answer. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Does the applicant or their agent have anything further to add to the application? If you do have something, you gotta step right up, turn on the mic, have a seat. Mic is yours.
I'm the applicant and owner of 3415 Reservoir Road. My name's Arie Dieleman. And then the only thing I had to add was that that the well that was proposed to be installed has been installed already, and I have a report of that. And then also there is an existing dug well in the front yard where the septic's proposed to go. And I also have a legal abandonment record from the well installer of that in case that's necessary. So that was the only thing to add.
It's good. Thank you for doing it the right way. So I don't see, so thank you for that. So we can move forward. For persons who have persons present who have either questions or wish to speak in favor or in opposition to the application, please address your questions through me. I'm going to say that there's nobody here to make an oral submission, so I can declare the public portion of the application is closed. Do any members of the committee require further clarification or wish to provide comments on this application? Seeing none, I'm going to call for a motion. So I have a motion that's in front of us, identified as COA 2023-058. Moved by member Bossy, second by member Hawkins, that staff report D23-033 be received, and further that minor variance application A-17-23 be approved, subject to the conditions included as attachment 5 to staff report D23-033. I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor, we are carried. The hearing for this application is now closed. You are free to stay if you would like, or you can leave at any point in time, and we're going to move forward. So township staff briefly introduced the application and report on any written notice or response to the notice circulated for agenda item E2, which is an application for a minor variance identified as A-19-23.
Thank you, Chair. The final application this evening, minor variance A-19-23 for lands located at 1954 South Riverside Drive. Here we have a key map showing the subject property is located here at the end of Irish Line as it enters just before it sort of crosses over the water body of McLean Lake, Gloucester Pool. And the property is located here along South Riverside Drive. The 2023 aerial imagery, the property is quite treed. There is a substantial amount of vegetation on the property. But sort of through the trees, the existing dwelling is located in this area here. There is a detached garage located in this area, as well as some an existing detached garage located in this area, which is proposed to be demolished and replaced with the structure, which is the subject of this minor variance, as well as a boat house located in this area, along with a boat port, which we will get into throughout this presentation. So the applicant is proposing to construct a detached garage. A minor variance has been requested to permit an increased maximum accessory building coverage. During the site inspection, it was observed that a boat port had been constructed on the property and is in contravention of the zoning bylaw. For those reasons, planning staff currently recommend deferral of the application pending additional information. And just to summarize, the requested minor variance is for 6.4% accessory coverage, whereas the bylaw normally permits 5%. Here we have the site plan, which was submitted with the application for building permit and for the minor variance before you this evening. The location of that existing dwelling, the boathouse, which was shown on the plan, a sleeping cabin located in this area, an existing detached garage located here, as well as the proposed detached garage in this area, which was to replace an existing detached garage. Just some excerpts from the construction drawing package, just showing the elevations of the proposed garage. And just some site photos from staff site visits. This was standing sort of on the driveway just into the property looking in, and you can see the existing sleeping cabin located here. The dwelling is located closer to the shoreline behind these trees. That existing detached garage is located off to the left here. And the new garage would sort of be off to the right of this picture, replacing this structure as shown here. During staff's site visit, it was observed that there is an existing boat port which has been constructed on the property beside the existing boat house. The township zoning bylaw, the township doesn't have records of a building permit being issued for this structure, and it would result in the property being in contravention of the zoning bylaw because you can only have either a boat house or a boat port, not both. So for those reasons, because this boat port would increase the accessory building lot coverage of the subject lands, and that has not been accounted for in the minor variance application, which was requested. Staff can effectively evaluate this minor variance application with the information currently available. So for those reasons, the Planning and Development Department is recommending deferral of the application. The Building Division does support that recommendation based on their comments of saying that the situation be rectified prior to proceeding to the committee. And there were no comments or objections received from the clerk's office, Public Works, or Fire and Emergency Services. So that wraps up my presentation with respect to this application. If there are any questions from the committee, happy to answer. Thank you.
Okay. Does the applicant or their agent have anything further to add to the application? If you're attending via Zoom, please unmute yourself and turn on your camera if you would like.
Yeah, I got nothing to add, really.
You got nothing to add?
Not really, no.
Okay. So we'll just carry on then with the rest of the meeting. So for persons present who have either questions or wish to speak in favor or in opposition to the application, please address your questions through me. And that's if you're attending via Zoom, please turn on your camera and ask away if there's any questions. Seeing there's nobody here in person, or there's nobody via Zoom that's unmuted themselves, so I declare the public portion of the application closed. Do any members of the committee require further clarification or wish to provide comments on this application? Member Bossy?
Through the chair to staff, the boat house, is it on the water? Like you drive a boat in on the water? Or is it on the land where you on a trailer?
It's on the land.
I guess
Perfect.
Another question.
Okay, Member Bossy, go ahead.
So what defines it as a boat house then?
Township staff.
Yeah, so through the chair to Member Bossy and all of the committee, a boat house is enclosed, so it would have full solid walls around it, whereas a boat port is an open-sided structure.
Member Bossy.
But why is it defined a boathouse versus a shed or a garage or
So the only permitted structures within the shoreline area are shoreline structures. So the township zoning bylaw wouldn't permit a shed within the front yard. It would have to meet a 20-meter setback. So in that case, the structure has a marine railway in the area there. So the structure would be used for the storage of marine equipment, therefore classifying it as a boat port. If the applicant later on through this process can provide justification for whatever type of use they want, for the structure is, then we would just consider it at the time.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no further questions, I think there's a support for deferral this evening. So I'm going to call for a motion. So I have a motion in front of us identified as COA 2023-059, moved by Member Hiles, second by Member Hawkins, that staff report D23-034 be received, and further that minor variance application A1923 be deferred to a future committee of adjustment meeting pending additional information. So I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor? We are carried. So the hearing for this application is now closed. You're free to stay for the remainder of the meeting, or just wait for adjournment if you would like to. So I'm gonna call for adjournment. So I'm gonna call for a motion. So I have a motion in front of us identified as COA 2023-60, moved by Member Bossy, second by Member Hiles, that the Committee of Adjustment be adjourned at 7:14 p.m. on Tuesday, December 9th, 2023. I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor? Carried. Good night.
Thank you.